Camera ready? Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to The Right Way to Do Wrong. So in 1906, Harry Houdini wrote this book, The Right Way to Do Wrong, and in this book, he divulged many of the con games and the secrets of criminals during that time frame. What he was trying to show people was that the cons that people believed to be very complex and difficult to run were actually very simple for the common man to do. So I'm going to take a page from his book and show you physical security secrets and show you how easy they are. These are things that are definitely used by criminals, but also by professional pen testers and red teamers as well. So people make the assumption that physical pen testing is, if you're not cloning a card or social engineering, it's all about lockpicking. And that is like the furthest from the truth. When I do physical engagements, I hardly ever pick a lock. So, things I'm not going to talk about. Electronic stuff. I'm purely going to look at physical manipulation, physical bypass of locks. These are important tools to know about. However, a lot of the stuff that I see on engagements are locks that aren't implemented correctly, things that have known bypasses that they never should have been using. Basically, the control was inappropriate for where it was used. So similar to patching your operating system, shouldn't you take care of the basic stuff first before you worry about advanced attacks? So we're going to leave the electronics out today. This is an OSINT conference, or partly an OSINT conference, so I'm not going to do the about me. You can look me up. But relevant to this talk, I run Oak City Locksport in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been running them for about 8 years now. We're good friends with the Tool folks, and you can find our chapter on their chapters list. I also do physical security engagements for Stern Security out of Raleigh, North Carolina. It's not my full-time job. I'm in application security, and since I got into picking, I thought this part was really interesting. It allows me to get an adrenaline rush, and anything I make from that ends up going into more tools and gadgets that I can play around with and more stuff for the club. So I will also nod to my imposter syndrome. I know I am probably not the most qualified person in the room on everything I'm going to show you today. Some of this is going to be, oh, well, yeah, that's basic 101 stuff. I use that all the time. I'm trying to give you a sense of everything that's out there. If you have something to add to my talk, please talk to me afterwards. So special thanks to some people. If you don't know who this is, his name is Deviant. He's the US president for Tool. Max Power, who's running the Village, and Howard Payne, all of whom I learned a lot from and kind of helped contribute to this talk. A lot of online videos from YouTube, so I'll give credit to Lockpicking Lawyer, Bosnian Bill, and Night Owl. Definitely learned a lot from all of their videos. And consider yourself warned. So yes, you are going to see some stuff that's really easy to do, and you're going to think, I can pull that off on the hotel. No, you're not authorized to pen test the hotel, your workplace, basically, or misuse security controls that you don't own. You can break things following some of these attacks, and just because it's non-destructive entry doesn't mean that it will completely be non-destructive or that local laws don't apply. And this is your last warning. You might want to get up and leave if you feel like you're going to get permanently scarred. You will see stuff in this talk that you're going to walk outside and start spotting things right away, and it's going to be pretty scary. This is going to be fast-paced, and I'm just going to go bam, bam, bam through lots of different things. All right, so let's start off with padlocks. I typically see these on secure document storage, like the recycle bins, filing cabinets that have an external security bar, or exterior gates to facilities like at the perimeter. The stuff I'm going to go through, if you watch talks by Bosnian Bill or Lockpicking Lawyer, before they even start trying to pick a lock, these are the things that they're going to do. So most of you are probably familiar with some sort of padlock shim. It's just a thin piece of metal that you insert inside the lock body, in between the lock body and the shackle, You rotate it, and it pushes the latch away from the shackle so you can open it. Some people make these from, soda can material. They sell them commercially. They tend to be a little bit thicker, though, because they're going for durability. I'm kind of on the fence with some of the commercial stuff. There are certain locks they work on, others that the tolerances are too tight, and the traditional like beer can shim works better. Some people have learned this attack against a master combo lock. That's the pretty typical one in lockpick villages. But what some people don't realize is that on padlocks, you've got two lock latches, and the same attack will work if you insert a shim on each side and rotate. You'll see these on some fairly cheaply made locks, ones that have spring latches. The higher end ones will implement a ball, so when you turn the actually turn the lock core, the balls can come in. There's no spring there, and you can't push them away. So that was it. Super easy, right? And that's like a $5 lock from Amazon, from China. The next piece is lever bypass. So Master actually has two latches, but some padlocks have just a single lever at the back of the keyway. Now the problem with this is if the keyway is completely open all the way to the back, you can reach all the way through the keyway and trip that latch. That's a poorly designed lock. What's supposed to be in there, if it's a well-designed lock, the keyway shouldn't go all the way to the keyway should not be open in the back, or there's some kind of plate or something stopping you from reaching that latch. So the tool that I'll use in my quick demo video, this is called a shank that I got from Sparrows. There's other ones out there, but essentially just a long, strong piece of metal. Simple as that. In the case of Master, I said there were two latches, so you can't do it with the single shank like that. They do sell this tool called a master switch. So you put one in, put the other in, rock them back and forth, and it trips both the latches. But to be blunt, I don't even have one of these in my toolkit because I can typically just rake open a master lock faster than I can do that, so it's just not worth it. All right, who here has seen warded locks before with these little zigzaggy lines, right? I think they were really popular on like kids' bikes in the 80s and stuff like that. They're really cheap to manufacture, which is why they're cheap to pick up. These basically have pieces of metal on the inside of the padlock, and those pieces of metal line up with the notches in the key. So that is what allows the key to rotate if it has the right notches. If it doesn't have the right notches in the right place, you can't turn the key. What the key is doing is the very top of this key is hitting this little lever here. That lever is what is keeping the shackle in place. So if you can reach to the back of the lock and just move that lever, the shackle will pop right open. So this is a picture of Harry Houdini's warded picks. But nowadays, you can pick up some nice spring steel ones. And you'll see basically this is the key with just all the extraneous material cut off of the sides. So this is how ridiculously easy these locks are to open. So there's my key. So basically, you would just try one after another until you find the right one that fits. So that's simple. Okay, the next one is American 700, 1100 series, and ABIS 72. These, and I should point out, manufacturers who have copied their design, because that goes on a lot. You see a lot of this coming out of China where they reverse engineer it and they sell them for cheap on Amazon. That particular one I actually saw in a lockpicking lawyer video and had to pick it up because it was such a great demonstration of this attack. So basically, the concept is the same as that shank or the lever bypass. You're bypassing all of the pins with a really thin piece of metal and popping out the back side of the core. And if you look at the back of the core, this half is basically like a lever, and when you insert the key and you turn it, that lever turns the latch release mechanism in the back. So if we can get a long, thin piece of metal all the way through this, it has a little flag on it, we can actually turn that latch release mechanism ourselves. So what manufacturers did to try to prevent that was they put in this little thin piece of metal called a security wafer, but it's a thin piece of metal. It had to be thin because they were retrofitting a design. They didn't want to redesign the entire lock. So somebody was kind enough to make a wafer breaker. So you can put it in there, give it a quick whack, put the tool in, and it still works. So here's a demo. This is a Peterson American bypass tool. I should note that the American 1100 and the ABUS 72 series, they were actually, or they're typically intended for what's called lockout tagout. So you would put those on a piece of machinery that you're going to be maintaining, and you don't want to get eaten alive or die. So the point is not necessarily security, it's safety. So some people will knock them for this design flaw, but if you're using them for their intended purpose, I don't know that it really matters that much. The problem is just uninformed, consumers. So the next attack is comb picks or overlifting. So in this picture here, you can see that this tool called a comb pick has been used to push the key pins, the driver pins, and the springs all completely out of the core. So lock manufacturers tend to follow standards, and they want to have interchangeable parts, and they buy stuff from one another. So a lot of the sizing, like the spacing for where those pins are, the size of the pins themselves, tend to be not really universal, but fairly common. So you can manufacture comb picks that are in various configurations, and then you have a lot of applicability across various brands. So here's an example of the Master 140 doing an overlifting attack. You're going to see a bunch of those in the lockpick village. Sesame lock. So Max Power, who's across the way, actually did a pretty in-depth talk at the Hope Conference, the last Hope Conference, and I figured it'd be easier just to reuse his stuff so I don't have to do another video. So basically in this attack, we're going to take a hook pick over the top of one of these dials, and what we're looking for is this here. This is actually kind of riding like a seesaw inside the lock. These fingers ride on top of the flywheels, and the flywheels are connected to the combination dials. So as you're moving that, they kind of bump up and down, and then they'll drop into a spot on the flywheel where you've got the right combination, and this tang will come out of the middle of the two pawls. So basically, we're looking for a way to insert metal over the top of the dial, push down on one of those fingers to get the tang out of the middle of the lock. So here you can see there's a little orange handle, and it's super hard to see this, which is why I outlined it in yellow. That little thin piece of metal right there, it's gone in beside the dial, and instead of pulling down on the finger, Max has gotten underneath the plate, and he lifts it up very slightly, and it pulls the tang out, and then the shackle will come out. You'll see these a lot. The Sesame lock was copied by a bunch of different manufacturers. The Master has one that is in every hardware store, the 175D. But these are very common on construction sites, utility places, anywhere where they don't want to hand out 50 keys. They just change the combo once in a while. So public works if you're going urban spelunking. All right, so decoding combo locks. Basically, with a combo lock, you're turning the wheels to align the notches in the various wheels so that you can pull the shackle out, or in this case, it's actually like a comb that goes into the combo lock. If you, in this case, this is a cable lock, not a padlock, but if you pull on it really, really hard and turn the dials, you can actually feel a point where the dial gets really hard to turn, and sometimes you'll feel like a click, and then all of a sudden it's really easy. If you find that spot, go all the way across, so you align them all to the same spot where they feel really hard to turn, and then you rotate all the wheels one by one. You'll eventually get to that point where all the gates line up and your lock will open up. This works equally on the little padlock version. You just yank really hard on that shackle while you're turning the dials, and you start, on a padlock anyways, you start the farthest wheel away from the shackle. So this is kind of an extreme example. I'm not going to go through this entire thing because it's kind of long, but you'll see where, you see that dial move over to the left? This is like a horrible lock. All right, I'm not going to do the whole thing. You get the picture, right? Okay. Jiggler or tryout keys are used on wafer locks. So you will see these in office furniture, amazingly enough, on key storage boxes that people put high security keys in and have this little garbage, low security lock. Essentially, the way that these work is these wafers are in here. The tang sticking out of them stops the lock from turning. When you insert the key, it moves the wafers up and down so they get out of the way, essentially, and then it allows the lock to turn. So a jiggler or tryout key is used like a combination of a lockpick rake and a tension wrench at the same time. So you put it in the lock, move it in and out really fast as you're putting a little bit of turning pressure, and voila, the plates line up and you can open it up. Unfortunately, this is how bad wafer locks are. So that's a little jiggler set I keep on my keychain of doom. Almost as easy as using the key, right? There are definitely higher security wafer locks that have tons of wafers packed really, really tightly, but this is what you're going to see if you're doing what I do and you're in a corporate environment and it's on file cabinets and desks and stuff like that. All right, doors. This is where a lot of people get really enthused. Padlocks can be a little boring. So many of us have broken into our own home, our parents' house, a friend's house, right, with the old credit card trick. And basically, the point to that is either push in on the latch or get behind the latch so you can push it in and then, you know, bam, the door opens. That's called, another word for that is lloyding. So these types of tools are just better than a credit card that you're going to mash up. This side for pushing in, the hook part for getting in behind the latch and pulling out. This is a traveler's hook. And then they come in some other varieties like the hall pass that you can keep in your wallet. And actually, plastic sheeting works really well, too, because it can get around corners. So this attack actually shouldn't work. And here's why. So exterior doors typically have, and higher security doors, have something called a dead latch. And go home and check your doors, because I bet you every single one of you has one of these installed incorrectly. What is supposed to happen is the dead latch should be pushed in, which is a locking mechanism that forces the latch to stay in place. So when your door closes, this curved part hits the strike plate, everything gets depressed, and then it springs out into the hole. And that dead latch should be positioned right there, right on the edge of the strike plate here, and then lock out. So then you get something behind the latch, it's not actually going to open. So this is what happens when you don't ensure that dead latch is properly installed. And in this case, like there's a big gap in the door. You can see, well, maybe you can't from the back, but it's actually not even touching the strike plate, so it's an improper install. And this is what happens. Traveler hook it from behind, and I'm in the network closet. And in this case, the customer was like, well, what's the worst they could do? They could just unplug everything. I'm like, that's not the worst thing. I've got a little drop box. I'm going to hide in the back here. You guys probably never come in here, and now I'm on your network like permanently. So that's how you can do the attack when you see the latch. This is what happens in the case where you can't see the latch. I've got a little plastic sheet there. And I just kind of jiggle it. It bends around the door. Ta-da! That's a little server room. So what people do as a patch for that, because I can't make the door frame smaller and I can't really adjust that, is they will take this protective plate and just put it over, thinking that that's going to stop people from getting behind and loading the latch. It's lazy because you can take a length of wire, and this video is courtesy of Deviant. Basically, insert it behind, rock it back and forth, bam. You can still reach the latch with wire. So the requirements in the Americans with Disabilities Act are such that most local building codes for commercial office areas require these types of handles because they're easy to use for people who can't actually grip handles. They can use a prosthetic, use a nub, whatever. And the other piece is thresholds that aren't really big so that people with wheelchairs can get over them easily enough. So this combination of factors means that you can take a tool such as this, which is called an under door tool, reach underneath the door, cant it back, and actually snag the handle from the inside. But you pull down and it basically opens the door like somebody is on the inside. Sold online for 29 bucks. Anybody can get it. So this is what it looks like. This is the inside view. It's kind of hard to see with it washed out. And then this is an outside view. So basically, you just put it under, cant it back, and you'll hear it hit the door, and you slide it over. Crash bars and exit paddles. So some doors may have a lock on the outside, and one of these things on the inside, you'll see exit levers, exit paddles. These are all basically panic exit devices. Any commercial space that has a lot of people in it, and there's a fire or other emergency, you need to allow people to get out very quickly. Unfortunately, if there's any sort of gap in between the doors and you can get access to that paddle, you can get a tool like this. This is sold by Sparrows. It's called a crash bar exit paddle. It doesn't have to look like this. You can manufacture your own. And essentially, let me see if there we go. You insert the tool in between the crack in the door, rotate it down, and grab the door and pull that in. And then in this case, I just push down the latch release mechanism. Super easy. Thumb turn levers. Once you see this, you're going to see this everywhere when you go shopping. And I'm to the point now that I don't tell proprietors about it anymore because I'm #1 on the suspect list right away. So basically, this is like a fire code and safety thing. You'll have a lock on the outside and the thumb turn lever on the inside, so you can close and lock as you're cleaning up your retail establishment. And then if there's any sort of incident, you can just flip it and get out really quickly. A lock on the inside would be ideal, but it's possibly not safe. So if there's any sort of gap that you can reach a tool in, you can use the thumb turn bypass tool. So this is essentially just a little clamp, and through this thin rod stock, there's a wire. And by turning the handle on this side, the clamp actually rotates. So you can push that in between the gap in the door, clip it onto the thumb turn that, and you're in. So here's a video of me using it on an audit, and what you'll see is I reach in, I turn it, and it keeps popping off a little bit. So what I learned from this was I needed grip tape on it to make it a little bit easier. And then you'll see it unlocks, but it doesn't actually release or doesn't depress the latch, because the latch is really, really big. So as I pull the tool out, you'll see me pull down, and that's actually grabbing the latch and popping it in. These doors have a big swinging arm latch that's in the middle of the door. All right, everybody's seen these, right? Request to exit sensors. And you've probably seen some videos. These got super popular for a while. Have to cover it. So what does a rec sensor do? It unlocks a door as somebody is approaching it. It does so by detecting heat, or I should say change in temperature and motion. The problem with that is commonly available canned air can basically provide a temperature change. It's making it cooler, not hotter, but it also provides motion. So the sensor will trip. Ideally, you would have like a button to mash on the side of the door that's inaccessible from the door, but people don't want to be inconvenienced, so they find it easier just to use a rec sensor. So if you spray canned air, there you go. I've seen some other videos and things where people have done this with like the underdoor tool in a hot, like a hand warmer thing, and you put it under and wave it around. I've actually gotten into my old office by going and getting some cardboard from the break area, wetting it, warming it up, and putting it on top of another piece of cardboard for stability, and then basically slid it underneath the door, just because it was a really big door gap. And then had to explain to my boss about how we needed to fix that. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So GE does make a rec sensor that employs active radar as well. So it will look for something roughly the size of a human moving, as well as the temperature change. And there are some other companies, I think Honeywell, that will resell this as part of their alarm setup, or sorry, their electronic door setup. So Adams Wright is the most popular brand of like commercial storefront doors and locks. So you'll see this all over the place. They employ a mortise cylinder that has, similar to the padlocks, a keyway that is open to the back. So you can actually put a very thin tool through the back of the lock, and this is called the Adams Wright bypass tool, and that's the latch release mechanism right there. Or sorry, the dead latch release mechanism. So this is kind of a two-pronged attack. This releases the dead latch, which then allows the latch to be lloyded. So you still need to use a piece of plastic, one of those shove tools, or a traveler hook or something. So Bosnian Bill, he has like the best video on this, is super in-depth. Who's seen these locks before? Where was the last time you saw one?
At a fire station I go to.
Okay. Server rooms. Yeah, that's the one I was looking for. Yeah, you'll see these on airports, typically on the jet bridge, leading right down to the tarmac. Every time I see those, I'm like, ah. Yeah, these are reprogrammable combination locks. People will put them on utility closets and places where lots of people have to come and go. Server rooms, like your workout center in the office or something like that. And the problem with these is that if we look, and these screen grabs are totally ripped off from Bosnian Bill, so all the credit goes to him. If you look inside here, as you turn the handle, this latch release mechanism is collapsing. However, if you put a really strong super magnet on the side, this little flag pops out, and now that latch mechanism doesn't collapse, so you can open up the door. So that's what it looks like when the handle turns. So you can walk up, click, turn, you're in. The thing that Bill cautions people about is make sure you put the magnet inside of a rag or a sock or something like that, because if you're going up to a metal door with a super magnet, and it's basically a really tight space, as soon as you put that on, you are not getting it off ever again. You need something for leverage. Here's the other problem with these. When contractors put them on, they're assuming that the owner of the building is going to know how to reset them, or especially if they're doing a lot of these on one job, so they'll leave the default combo on them. So the default combo that I literally got out of the installation manual was, hit buttons 2 and 4 simultaneously, then hit 3, and you're in. Of course, the person who installed the lock probably should have been really clear about what combo do you want, but we won't get into that. Okay, this one is going to totally blow some people's minds. And I'm going to drop an O-Day today, by the way. So key lock boxes, used in a lot of commercial situations where you got building maintenance, they need to get into like office suites in a building. You'll see these on railings in places where there's a lot of Airbnbs. These photos were taken in Toronto. This was actually taken on one of the pentest jobs that I did, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a second. So there's 3 different types I'll show you. This one is a Master 5400. It's got several rolling wheels for the combination, and like a lot of combination locks, I showed the decode method earlier, but there's another method. If you insert a very thin shim stock, very thin metal, on the side of the wheel as you're rotating it, you can actually feel the shim pop into that little notch in each of those dials. And once you've got them all aligned, you rotate them a couple times, and the lock will open right up. Literally the weekend I sat down to film a video of me decoding one of these locks, I literally like set it up on the tripod and got the camera lined up, and then I got a notification on my phone that Deviant literally just posted this like 6-minute long video on decoding it, and it was like, all right, I'm just going to point people to him. So go to Deviant's YouTube channel, and he's got that on there. This one and the next one I'm going to show you, I actually brought today. They're in the village, and if you pay attention, when you go over there, you can decode them, and there's chocolate inside them. And we'll reload them as people get it open, but don't share the combo. All right, so and while I'm applying this to this kitty lockbox, it will actually work on lots of other brands as well. So these push-button locks, if you push down on the latch release lever and then push very hard on the buttons, and I mean extremely hard, you will feel, see how that's moving? You will feel the latch release mechanism push back on your finger. So the ones that don't push back are not part of the combo. These boxes, you don't have to get the combination in the right order. It's literally just, they're like on-off switches. So all you have to do is find the numbers, punch them in, and there you go, it'll open up. So the one that I showed you that was open, I was kind of holding it, on that particular engagement, it was on the back of a building, and when I opened it up, it had 2 keys in it. One key was for the fire control room, and the one next to it was for the telco incoming prem. So in there were AT&T, Time Warner, I think Charter Cable, something like that. In any case, there was a laptop sitting there on a little cart plugged into the AT&T fiber switch. And I'm like, okay, that's technically out of scope, but to like just waggle the mouse a little bit, that's probably fine, right? So I waggle the mouse, and it's completely unlocked. And up comes the fiber management interface, logged in, ready to go. And I was just like, oh man, I could have, put in some sort of fiber man in the middle appliance, but the other one was even better. I got into the fire control room, and on the wall was a little beige box. It was a key storage box. So open that up. Every single tenant in the entire building had keys to their offices, HID cards to get into the building, to get into individual offices, and I had a alarm system key fob that's used to turn off the alarm in the morning. So it was like completely owned the entire building because of one dumb lockbox. All right, so the next one here, this comes with anti-jamming. So anti-jamming is supposed to defeat that attack I was showing you where you're putting pressure on the latch and pushing on the buttons. So as you're pushing on it, the button will kind of click in and you don't feel any back pressure. So David S., who didn't want his last name published, from Oak City Locksport figured this out because he is just amazing at decoding things. So this is the O'Day I'm dropping. This is a regular push-button lock like the Kitty. But guess what? If you put a tension wrench in this combination reset button, or combination clear button, it completely disables the anti-jamming mechanism. So now you follow the same technique that I showed you for the Kitty lockbox. Now the pressure that you feel back is very nuanced. It's not quite as hard. But once he told me the technique, I was able to open it in like 20 seconds. It was super easy. So there you go, O'Day. Yes?
Do you jam the clear button in the natural state or once you kind of like pushed it up? Because usually it's like the clear thing is kind of like you push it against the spring and then it springs back.
Right, so the question was about how to use the clear mechanism. So without touching anything, you push the clear mechanism down in order to clear the combo, and you want to jam it in the down position. Yep, you're welcome. So tubular locks, these basically are pin tumbler locks. They just look a little different. The mechanism for these, however, is instead of the pins going up and down, they go in and out. And these are like, you'll see the barrel-shaped key. This key has notches all the way around it that align with those pins, and the depth of the cut will align the pins in or out to the right spot so you can then turn it to open. You'll see these used on a lot of as backup keys for small safes. You'll see them on key storage boxes that are typically above, like hooked onto a door. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but suffice to say that there are tubular picks, and you basically put them in the lock and rock them back and forth a little bit, and you can essentially impression the lock based on the pressure, the back pressure of the springs. As you're going back and forth, you find the sweet spot and turn it. The one thing I will warn people is that when you buy a safe, like an electronic safe, most people don't realize that behind the little manufacturer's logo is actually a keyway. They want people to have a backup key in case the battery dies or something and you can't actually get in. It's typically a tubular lock or it's one of those dumb wafer locks. So if you have one of those, your safe is probably not very safe. Knox boxes are a different type of key box, and these are a lot more secure. So these are used by law enforcement, fire personnel, and they're used to store keys and key cards to get into a building in case of emergency. The way that this works is when the box is installed, the fire department actually has to come out and use their master key, and that one master key applies to the entire metro area. They open it, tenant puts in their stuff, they lock it back up. Tenant never has the key to the Knox box. Now, that key blank is controlled. It's not, all the keys are numbered. They're sent to departments, and they know exactly, Joe got key number 53, so if it ever turns up lost, they know exactly who lost it. It's a little bit of accountability there. There's a problem here, though, right? They get lost eventually. So what happens when, and I'm sitting here looking at my picture on the screen. It wasn't even up there. So what happens when you lose one of these is, somebody can take that and go building to building completely undetected and just go steal everything they want, and there's no signs of forced entry. So this happened in Austin, and they had to have an emergency budget change, basically $300,000 to replace every single Knox box in the metro area. I should point out, too, that these are super hard to pick. They use a Medico biaxial lock. So, and there is a alarm, like a tamper alarm, that you can implement, but you'll find most people don't bother. So, all right, common keys. It's even better if, instead of needing to use a tool, you happen to have the key on your key ring already. Problem here is manufacturers like to keep costs down. So when they order locks that are going to go on their stuff, They don't want to order 5,000 uniquely keyed locks. They just order 5,000 of the same lock. It's easier for the lock company to manufacture. They pass it along at a lower rate. So that manufacturing company isn't going to retool for the next round. They're just going to sell the same lock to everybody. So Deviant and Howard Payne did a talk at Hope 11 called "This Key is My Key, This Key is Your Key." It's on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. I'm going to cover a little bit of what they did, but I've also got something new to drop here. So key to like, these are very common wafer keys. You'll see C415A on voting machines and stuff. 501CH is super common for industrial controls and cabinets and toolboxes. CH751, everybody get your keys out. Look at your keys. If you have a little wafer lock, you probably have one of these keys. You probably have several of these in your drawers at home and you don't even realize it. And if you don't have a key, all you have to do is look at the face of the lock, and sometimes there's a number on it. Or if you can see somebody's key, there might be a number on it. Those are what we call direct bidding codes or possibly indirect bidding codes. Those are things that you read the number off the front, and then you can actually make a key to use on it. So if you're going someplace frequently, just kind of scope out, see if there's a number, make the key. Then also look up the indirect bidding, because it might actually, so there's locksmith software you can get online, basically. Look up the code. It might be 5579, but the pinout is actually 2351. It's just a way of looking it up quickly. Elevator keys. So these got super popular in the red teaming pen test world. So basically, you exploit the fact that most manufacturers are going to use the FEO K1. Some states will legislate that you have to use a specific keyway, and those are issued to everybody, and you can actually look them up and then make a key before you go on an engagement. The problem with those is as soon as you engage the fire mode, the elevators all go to the first floor. If you're on a pen test, that is super noisy. So what you want instead are supervisory keys. The supervisory key allows you to only control that one elevator and doesn't make a bunch of noise. So I worked with Howard Payne and came up with this list of common supervisory keys that you can find outside of any state mandated thing, which typically they're not going to mandate anything for a supervisory key. I should mention that if you're trying to take a photo or whatever, my presentation is going to be online. I'll post the slides and tweet it out. Common keys you'll also find on these telephony access boxes. Door King and Lanier are the two top brands, and these are the things where you go up and you hit somebody's apartment number, and then they buzz you in. Well, you can actually use these keys to open up the faceplate. And Door King, there's a little momentary switch. You hit it, and then the door buzzes open. On the Lanier, there's a relay that you actually have to jump, and does the same thing. Lanier is a little unique, though, in that they also employ a tamper switch. So it's kind of hit or miss as to whether that's actually hooked up. But you can defeat the tamper switch with a super magnet on the side, just like the Caba Simplex, as long as you know where to put it. Dennis Maldonado did a talk on this Lanier system at DEF CON 23, and he goes even deeper, gets into manufacturer default codes and programming mode and all that, so you don't need to use a key. Okay, so when I go on engagements, what am I keeping in my black bag? I'm definitely a proponent of having a go bag that you never take anything out of. It's ready, so you're not having to go around and do a checklist or anything like that. I personally use just a generic laptop backpack because I'm mostly going into corporate types of situations, so it doesn't really look overly sketchy. Like everybody else is carrying the same Swiss, whatever backpack. And your bag does have to fit your pretext, so as like the super white privileged middle-aged male, like it works for me. Of course, the other typical things that work are the staff type of shirt, or like the yellow vest, the clipboard and stuff like that. And Deviant's a big fan of carrying around a clipboard, like one of those contractor ones that you can actually open up and just store all your tools inside of that. So getting down to the tools, I pretty much talked about all of this stuff. The keychain of doom, I actually have a bunch of the common keys and jigglers, lever bypass, that sort of stuff. And Deviant did a whole talk on that. That's on his YouTube channel. So the stuff I didn't really talk about, I will carry a Plantable micro camera. So little 1-inch battery powered, runs for almost 2 hours. You can put in a bush and watch people input PIN codes to get into the building. Body micro camera to record engagements. I've got the little pen format that's HD and runs for 2 hours. So you don't have to worry about something super obvious, mounted on like the GoPro. Like somebody runs into you on an engagement, now that's super suspicious, right? And you want to have visible evidence to put in your report, so that works. Duct tape or clear packing tape in case like you post up outside a door smoking, somebody goes in, or maybe they're coming out and you hold the door open for them and then put some tape on and you're not going in, you're just sitting there smoking, and now the latch doesn't work correctly, so you can just pop it and open the door. And then the last thing is a magnetic pull detector. So before you go through the door using one of the techniques I showed you, maybe you want to figure out if it's alarmed first and see if you have to deal with that alarm system. So the pull detector literally is just a little plastic wand, and you can go around the outside of the door, and it'll flip around if there's any magnet that's in the alarm contact switch, and then you know exactly where the alarm sensor is. And it's up to you whether you want to try to bypass it or maybe find a door that isn't alarmed. So conclusions. Cover the basics first, proper install, don't use garbage gear, and try to basically deal with any gaps or cracks around your door. Don't assume that an access control device is going to be used the way it was intended to be used. Don't rely on a less secure method to store high security keys or devices, and do your research. These are some of the places that you can look. Lockpicking 101, the Lockpicking Reddit. Seriously, just query on Google for whatever lock you're looking at. Bypass, picked, that sort of thing. Somebody probably did a write-up on it. So with that, thank you very much. Any questions? Are there any lock boxes I would recommend for locks? Yes. So Kitty makes a metal lock box that you can mount, or it has a shackle, but it is a dial combo lock. I believe it may be able to be decoded, but nowhere nearly as quickly as those. There's a lot of ones that are like the newfangled Bluetooth and all that, and I just stay away from them all because they tend to be mostly plastic junk on the inside. So I think you had a question. Yeah, you would hope that when people figured out that there was a big vulnerability and publicized it, that the lock manufacturers would change. But as long as consumers aren't informed and they're still making money, they're really not incentivized to do anything. So, and you had another one?
Average safety like locks on gun cabinets. Are these better than usual? I would hope so. But
no, not particularly. Deviant actually did a talk at DEF CON, I think it might have been 18 or something. So if you Google Deviant gun safe, it'll come up pretty quick. I would check that one out. Yes, sir.
Recently in Virginia, they have a law that says you can't have lockpicking. You heard? What's your opinion on that one?
Yeah, so the comment or question was, Virginia has a law basically that says you're not allowed to have lockpicking gear. Yeah, so Virginia is, most states are what we call intent states. So the state has to prove that you intended to commit a crime if they discover you with lockpicks. Virginia, they say if you have lockpicks, that is proof of intent. So you're walking down the street and somebody stops you. They have a reason to search you for weapons or whatever. They find them, like, okay, you're up to no good. In North Carolina, where I live, it's no big deal. However, if you are you know, going around rattling doors around a darkened business at 3 in the morning, now suddenly the charges that went from a simple trespass is now, I want to say it's like a class 2 misdemeanor or something, because you now possess burglary tools. So, but if you go to tool, tool.us/laws.html, they actually have a map, and you click on the state and it'll advance you to the laws for that state that apply to lockpicking tools. So basically, when you're going to go somewhere, look it up before you go. Tennessee is especially bad about possession of lockpicks. They're probably the worst in the US. But it's typically up to the police agency whether they really choose to enforce you on the street. So, yes?
Do you carry the underdoor tool with you when you go on engagement? And how do you, it's quite big, so how do you describe it?
Yeah, so how do I carry the underdoor tool? The underdoor tool is very, very flexible. So I typically keep it stored, you know, hooked onto my bag so it can be extended, but I actually insert it in the laptop compartment, basically give it a big hug and drop it in, and zip it up, and then it just springs out into the compartment. And yeah, it's pretty simple to hide. Yes, sir?
Have you ever used that technique where you use a photo of a key and then make the key?
Oh yeah, have I taken a photo of a key and made the key? I haven't. I'm not a very good impressioner, and in the field, I think the stress level of trying to do that would be hard. I mean, yeah, I guess if I'm doing a lot of recon and see the key, I can make it at home, but for me, it would be like, did I get it exactly right or not? So yeah, so I have not personally done that. So, yep, and I think, yes.
So kind of knowing what you know about lockpicking, what kind of locks do you or would you put on your own house?
Right, so the question was, knowing what I know about lockpicking, what would I put on my own house? Honestly, I don't stress about it too much, because if your intent is to prevent burglary, then a burglar is just going to kick in a door or break a window. So putting a really expensive lock on, if they decide they're going to take a hammer to it or kick in the door, it could damage the lock, and now you're out a much bigger price tag. I have a standard Schlage on my house. However, I dropped in a 6-pin core instead of the typical 5-pin core. I put in security pins, like spool pins and serrated pins in mine. So it is a hell of a lot harder to pick, and it can't be bumped, but it's still a garbage lock because, you know, the other thing is highly visible cameras, dogs. When you're away getting like a TV, they actually make these TV lights that kind of flicker, and it looks like somebody's watching TV while you're, you know, so you keep it up, you know, while you're away, and you can even put it on a timer so it goes on and off. So yeah. All right, I think I'm over time here. I can take more questions in the hallway though. Thank you.